Yes.
Yeah. Welcome. I'm glad to see so many. No worries. So this is the beginning of a whole day in the peer production track. And what do we mean with peer production? The idea is how to think, to reflect over how could the model which free software and Windows, free software, as opposed to Windows, and this other thing called Wikipedia, and so on, could be taken as a model for thinking of how to organize all other things in society. What's important here, of course, is not if it's digital or something like that, it's about computers, but the fact that there is a level of voluntary undertaking in the tasks, that it's a self-selected task, and that becomes important only in relation to how most other things in society are being organized, which is, well, you know, through the wage labor and a relation that you are compensated with money for your expenditure of effort, and the idea is then that wage or property being your reward. So peer production being the contrapoint to that, because you have chosen freely to engage in the work or in contributing to a common project, there is no need for remuneration, there's no need to be compensated monetarily, and so it ends up in a common and it's a shared wealth. So this very briefly being the idea of peer production, which is the common theme of the track. And the idea of the journal when we set it up in 2011 is to interrogate, to inquire this concept, but not in an evangelical sense, but to be a kind of opposition within the opposition. So the driving force is also to question, to see the white holes, the black spots on the map within this imaginary. Because at the same time, it's also a political imaginary. It's also a rally myth to rally us and engineers and I don't know, politicians and whatever around. So this being kind of the mission of this journal, and as you probably already are aware of, we had our 5th issue published yesterday or the day before, Maxigas being one of the editors, and the theme was shared machine shops. So I'm putting this to the fore because shared machine shops so clearly goes back to the theme of this first slot in our day, which is production in the industry, which is factory production. So to insist on that link is really central in order to see what we're doing, to see hacking, computers, makers, whatever, in the very long term, and to have that historical perspective on what is going on. So this being part of the the mission of the day and of showing this film. So that's generally on what peer production is and what the journal seeks to achieve. Then, before I continue, I should also say there is a change in the schedule of today's production. That is, unfortunately, Sarah Tocchetti, who should have was one of our invited speakers, fell ill and she could not come. She would have talked about the relation between biohacking as it's being developing in the US now, and how it's being growing together with FBI. How FBI is sort of in various ways nestling itself into to funding their organizations, to slice the leaders in that movement, to FBI organized meetings and those kind of things. And anyway, I cannot speak for her. That would have been her topic. Instead, we have made a change. We have Kevin Flanagan, who will be speaking at her slot, so before lunch. And at the very last slot, which would have been Kevin's, we propose to organize a panel discussion. But this remains to be seen if there's an interest and so on. We would suggest that we have this final slot to discuss these issues and spend some more time on it. So we'll see if you're interested, and so on. Then I would like to say something about the film which we are going to see, which is about 20 minutes long. A documentary which was made by, which was found in the BBC archives, and which was found by Adrian Smith. And Adrian Smith is one of the contributing authors in this journal. And he has been investigating and interviewing and meeting many of those people who were involved in the Lucas plan. And the film is about the Lucas plan. And the Lucas plan, to say it very, very briefly, because that will be the whole film, was an arms manufacturing conglomerate in England that actually got state subvention. I mean, they were completely state funded because the requirements, the interest of
there were not so many other customers buying military airplanes in that moment. It was only the state.
Yes. Yeah. So and there were anyway. So it cannot be explained by competition in that kind of sense, and not a direct global competition. They wanted to lay off the workers, and the workers responded by saying, we have all the tools, we have the machines, we know how to use them. Instead of laying us off, making us unemployed, then the state will have to fund us through unemployment benefits. We could run the show, and we could start to do something else than arms manufacturing. We could start to make prototypes that are socially useful. So this is how the concept came out of that. And then you will see the story develops, but it really can be taken as one of, arguably one of the founding moments of what is now 40 years later, all the hullabaloo around the makerspaces and so on.
From the plan, a whole movement for socially useful production was born, and they started to do a lot of other things than making this plan or finding out what the factory could do. They started to do neighborhood shops, machine shops, and helping people fixing their washing machines and just seeing what they could do with local community. Let's see the film.
Let's see the film, yeah. So
describes the local employment situation. In the area where we work, there was a general decline in the engineering industry as a whole. All around us, engineering companies were closing down and were being replaced in the main by companies who were involved in distribution, that kind of semi-skilled sort of work. Now, you see here the beginning of the real industrial decline. That factory, which used to produce engineering components, now for sale. This next one along here was part of the GKN group, again producing mechanical engineering components. That's for sale and complete demolition. And this was typical of the decline in this area, so that the workers at Lucas down the road could see all these factories closing and realize that they had to develop an entirely new tactic to fight with these redundancies, because they've been clearly unsuccessful in those other factories down the road. We took the view that it was no good just waiting until the problems were on us and then whining to the government or to the TUC or whoever that we want to run the work.
Could you turn it up a little more? Thanks, Johan.
And I said to them, well, look, why don't you go away? And so I suggested to them to do a corporate strategy for your own company, based on your own knowledge of the company, of the equipment, of the skills, of the market available, and they did. And it's one of the most remarkable exercises that's ever occurred in British industrial history. The Inter-Union Combine Committee spent a year putting the plan together. When it was made public, it received wide coverage from a variety of sources, including a prominent engineering management magazine. The Financial Times saw it as a unique initiative in industrial relations. So how did the plan come about, and what happened to it? The plant which took up the idea of the plan most readily was Burnley, one of the largest Lucas Aerospace factories, employing 3,000 people out of a total workforce of 14,000. Since the decline of the cotton industry, other industries like aerospace have moved into Burnley, but unemployment is still a major problem. The Lucas Aerospace plant here, relying like other aerospace sites on mainly aircraft and defence contracts, was hard hit by the Rolls-Royce crash of 1970. In July 1976, we filmed local shop stewards from both blue and white-collar unions who worked on the plan to see why they had adopted this new approach. In 1970, when we had the redundancy situation, so our manager at that time had us in just prior to that and was talking about the business not looking so clever today, and but never mind, lads, we've got all these lads over in research who are looking at new products. So when this business cropped up, the redundancy situation cropped up, then we thought, well, I did anyway. I thought, well, we're all right. The company's there. They got these alternative products. Oh, well, that's it. Not to bother. We haven't got all our eggs in one basket, such as we've always been thinking. It didn't always Rolls-Royce with the relying upon and think people like that. The company are there. They have that building over there which they can do all these clever things. So we're all right, lads. However, it didn't transpire that way. And this we realised. And of course, once we realised that, then we said, well, we've got to do something now. The company are not going to do anything, and we've got to protect ourselves. What do you do when your job declines and goes? If it's not there and the manufacturing's not needed, what do? You go on the dole. Now, this is a horrible prospect for any worker to be pitched onto the dole, and it's very degrading. You can strike, you can occupy the factory, you can live there. But if there's no demand for the article that you've been making, if the demand's suddenly gone, then you can sit in there till the cows come home. So, with that recent bitter experience in mind, I think it's probably stimulated us in Burnley, more than at the other factories, for example, to really sit down and grapple with the problems of what can people be usefully employed upon once the current product line disappears. It was the shop stewards at each site who took a leading role in putting the plan together, feeding ideas and information to the Central Combine Committee. But initially they found it difficult to involve the workforce. Now I remember when I sent round the questionnaire to draw on the knowledge of some of my members in compiling the technical side of the corporate plan, machine tools plant, I sent a circular around that said we want answers to these questions and really your jobs depend on it. And I got not one reply to it. It was primarily a committee of 6 in Burnley that did the work, did the quote, ask the questions, get the answers from wherever you can get them. And that's really the big trick, is to get the answers to questions, because sometimes management are a little bit reluctant to divulge some information. You can't force it out of them. And this is the way it was done. There was about 6 of us, I think, involved in Birmingham. They were down towards it. We're looking to look up on and read about if other companies were thinking of doing anything similar, they would come and ask how do you go about it. We'd like done it from grassroots and go and make a success of it. With support from the workforce for their ideas, the Combine Committee organised a series of teachings on the corporate plan. The first of these was at Paddyham Town Hall near the Burnley plant. Could we ask you to
Pro ordinary, ladies and gentlemen, please, brothers and sisters. Just to start the ball rolling, a few months ago we asked the Burnley workforce of Lucas Aerospace to endorse the corporate plan. Now obviously to a lot of the people within the workforce have put up the blind faith into the shop stewards and the union representatives, in as much as it's a very technical subject and obviously it's something you can't explain at the mass meeting. So first and foremost we've got to explain...
At the meeting, shop stewards outlined the background to the plan, and Mike Cooley described some of the proposed products and showed a film of a prototype road rail vehicle, one of the pieces of hardware that had already been built and tested outside the company. The aim of the road rail vehicle was to provide a transport system which would be cheap and effective and would meet the needs we've got in Britain to overcome congested cities and at the same time make full use of the national railway network that we've got. Now to achieve both of those things, we had to have a vehicle that could run through a city as a coach and then by some means go straight onto the national railway network. We did that by designing a simple guide mechanism so that you could use the rubber tyres both when you're going along the road and on the rails. Besides the road rail vehicle, there were 150 other proposals in the fields of energy, medicine, transport and oceanics, with the emphasis being on products that met social needs, such as plans for heat pump units for council houses and an increased output of the company's kidney machines. But the plan didn't just outline proposed alternative products, it also called for new methods of production. At the teach-in, Mike Cooley illustrated some of the effects of current types of production by referring to an agreement between the Amalgamated Union of Engineering Workers and British Leyland on rest periods.
Not 1.6 or 1.7, it's computer precise, 1.62, and the toilets incidentally have been strategically placed close to the production line. Recovery from fatigue, 1.3 minutes. Sitting down after standing too long, 65 seconds. For monotony, 32 seconds. Now we say that that form of technology is unacceptable, and if the only way to build cars and products of that kind is to use that kind of technology, then we should be questioning whether we should be making those kind of products in that sort of way at all.
So what the plan was calling for was socially useful and needed products produced in a socially desirable way. But this is an approach which to some extent challenges existing concepts of profit.
What percentage of the diversification is into a commercial representative field as opposed to a social or socially acceptable health-wise field?
Whether a product is regarded as profitable or not really depends on the value that the government and society puts on it. For example, it is regarded as profitable to make Harriers, but not profitable to make kidney machines. Now it's the same customer, the government. So it just depends on what price the government put on it. And does one expect a hospital or a school to be profitable?
I think for the ordinary worker, I think you appeal to the ordinary worker, not those who's been involved in the committee, need a God to be preached, education to make them realize not what you've been emphasizing, to come away from the jumping for the carrot and the money, but to look forward something more human value, more social value, more reliable and secure. How would we overcome this to come to our level? At your level, brought down to our shop floor level. It needs a lot of education.
But these questions only brought out a few of the ideas the teach-in obviously raised in the minds of the 300 people present. To illustrate the more complex response of the different members of the workforce, we filmed a subsequent discussion in the local pub. Four workers and one of the research staff and two middle management planning engineers.
Put it this way, if you work for a company, for about 8-10 years, like I worked for it for 10 years, and they're coming up, they're going to say, well, that's your lot, run up against the wall. It's got a door, mate. I'm okay, I mean, you know, bar columns, I'm not there. But put yourself at Sunday at 58. Not looking there. I'm not looking at nobody, but just put yourself in a certain position, which I did when I was this weight. And what chance is finished? He's on the door from 58, never get it. Well, why can't we set something up for this? Why can't we put the money in unless it belongs to We've got suggestion schemes now, and it's plastered all over the walls in workers. Suggestions. He can put the suggestion in now, and it'll take him 6 or 8 months before he even gets a reply.
Most of us, we still work on the shop floor, and it's not the sort of the technical things you get involved in. Like tonight was explained to us all the different aspects that we could get into, you know, like floor dynamics and, you know, all those sorts of different things in medicine, you know. Yeah. Which was, I mean, I didn't even know there was made a kidney machine. You know, I mean, I'm young, I have a family, 2 kids. I'm looking a lot further, and I'm looking at, you know, with Lucas, I'm looking for years to come. What's going to happen then?
Nobody actually mentioned it tonight. It was sort of perhaps deliberately remained sort of kept it at a low profile. It's basically all the different philosophies, you know, and the capitalist system. It's a question of who manages, and this is a challenge to that.
Well, when you start coming up and saying, okay, let's push the kidney machines. You know, let's make the kidney machine as a big thing. Let's get them all out.
Yeah, but they've got to satisfy the shareholders.
Well, yeah.
If you've got money invested in the company, you want the return for your money. You want to be subsidised. It's something that's so. The only question to find out is shareholders. I mean, cars on the shop floor are getting, you know, that's where the company is.
Well, then again, the same.
In May 1976, the company stated that they did not feel able to accept the proposals outlined in the plan. Although they offered to hold local consultative meetings on new products at site level, they would not meet the Combined Shop Stewards Committee to discuss the overall plan, claiming that the committee were not part of the established negotiating structure and were not a representative body. They issued a statement which in essence suggested that the products outlined in the plan were unsuited to the Lucas product range and were not likely to be profitable. But the Combine Committee does not accept that all the products are likely to be unprofitable.
The profitable ones include the heat pump, which is like a refrigerator working in reverse and conserves a lot of energy. The company is still saying that that is not a viable product, but we have intercepted one of the company's own market surveys, which shows that the market for these in the domestic sector by 1985 will be 255 million, and in the commercial sector by 897 million pounds. Now added together, that's £1,000 million market. So nobody can seriously suggest that that's not viable.
Obviously, not all the products proposed for the various sites have as much market potential as this, but some clearly will. So why does Cooley think the company rejected their corporate plan?
For 2 reasons. Firstly, we are insisting that for every potentially profitable one that we give them, that they also take on board a socially useful one. So we're doing that within a collective bargaining framework. And they don't want to take on the socially useful ones. The second thing is they're very concerned at the shift in power. They actively dislike the idea that their workers will begin to decide what products they should be making and how they should be making them.
We would have liked the company to answer some of these points, but they repeatedly refused to take part in this program. The Transport and General Workers Union was one of the unions who supported the plan. In a pamphlet on the implication of defence cuts, it encouraged the shop stewards in other firms to take up the idea. The TUC, although sympathetic to the plan, were apparently unable to intervene directly and declined to take part in this program. In general, the response of the unions to the plan was less than enthusiastic.
The kind of things we're doing are outside the normal trade union traditions. The Combine Committee itself is not really accepted into the trade union structure in any official sense. In our view, it's absolutely essential to have it to deal with multinational companies, but the trade union movement as at present constituted doesn't cater for this kind of organization.
Ernest Scarborough believes that the present trade union structure fails to deal with multi-plant companies because of its fragmentation by trade and by location.
You talk about the major unions, like the AUEW or the Transport and General Workers Unions, they're still based on, basically on the divisions, whereby the country is split up into a number of separate groups, and consequently they're not capable of dealing with anything
on a national scale or a multi-union scale. I think also that the bureaucracy in the trade union movement is fearful or maybe even hostile to this high level of rank-and-file activism.
In February 1977, following rumours that 1,100 workers were to be made redundant, the Combine Committee sought a meeting at Westminster. More than 70 shop stewards arrived to explain the plan to the 11 MPs who attended the meeting. Later, these MPs invited Lucas executives to discuss the future of the company with them. The MPs most closely concerned with arranging the meetings and what happened subsequently were two backbench Labour MPs, Jeff Rooker and Audrey Wise. They were in favour of the plan and sought to gain support for it in Parliament and from government. What happened?
Well, first of all, there's a major problem in that you can't ask parliamentary questions about an individual company of this nature, particularly as far as this corporate plan is concerned. The reason for that is there's no ministerial responsibility for the running of Lucas. And ministers will only answer questions for matters on which they're responsible. And it brings out the divide between Whitehall and Westminster. In other words, the executive branch of government that carries out decisions and takes action is the government and Whitehall. It is not Parliament. And there's a great myth, of course, as far as the public are concerned, and in some ways, as far as the shop stewards and Lucas Aerospace are concerned, that Parliament runs the country and we as backbenchers can make these decisions and put pressure to change the course of their company. This is not so. We can raise the matter in debate when we have a debate on defence, for instance, or a debate on industrial strategy, industrial policy.
We've actually had amendments down which specifically mention the Lucas corporate plan.
But you have to then fall back to the, well, it is a fallback position, to actually write to ministers. And these take sometimes a long time to get replies. The average minister replying to a member of Parliament will take 4 to 6 weeks, sometimes longer to reply to a letter. So I wrote to ministers of the Department of Industry and got very little change at all.
We know that the government has weapons at its disposal in relation to Lucas if it wants to use them. For example, Lucas, like all private companies, gets certain concessions, certain allowances. There is money which could be made conditional on cooperation. The government could use its power as a purchaser. Lucas, the biggest customer of Lucas is the Ministry of Defence.
The shop stewards were obviously disappointed that the government weren't prepared to help them. This surprised them, since the plan seemed to fit in with the Labour government's industrial strategy, and in particular with its policies on planning agreements and job creation. We invited the present Secretary of State for Industry to take part in the programme, but he also declined.
They don't want to do anything about it because, in my view, it would represent a shift in power in industry. All the government's job creation schemes, such as cleaning up beaches, counting gravestones, lampposts and so on, all of these are costing the nation state £680 million a year, but they do not change any of the power relationships. Whereas if our scheme were to be accepted, it would mean that workers would have the right to say what products they thought society needed. And they would be looking at products which were socially useful, not just profitable. And I don't think the government is willing to accept that kind of commitment.
Tony Benn, now Secretary of State for Energy, sees the Lucas initiative in a longer-term perspective.
It is not possible to change decisions in a complicated society in 24 hours or 1 year. And after all, Robert the Bruce, if at first you don't succeed, try again. You've got all sorts of setbacks. And I have them myself, and I'm trying to engage in campaigns all the time as a minister. You mustn't think that position always because you're a cabinet minister, you're trying to persuade your officials, you're trying to persuade House of Commons, you're trying to persuade the electors, you're trying to persuade cabinet colleagues, trying to persuade groups of people, and I'm continually faced with setbacks. And I just refuse to believe that this quality and character is wasted. It may take a bit of time. After all, there are many things advocated in the middle of the 17th century by the levelers that have never been implemented, in Britain. So you've got to take a proper perspective.
The long-term perspective may be fine for a politician like Tony Benn,
but it doesn't deal with the immediate problems of plant closures and loss of jobs, which the alternative corporate plan was designed to avoid. Already the workforce has been cut from 18,000 in 1970 to 12,000 in 1977. Jobs continue to be lost on the various sites by natural wastage, that's to say positions not being filled when people leave. Outright redundancies were also expected, because although Lucas Industries is highly profitable, its aerospace division has seen a profit of £4.4 million in 1976 turn into a loss in 1977. The Combine Committee feared that the company intended to run down the aerospace division. In March 1978, an announcement was made which seemed to confirm these fears. 5 plants were scheduled to close, and 2,000 jobs were affected. It's perhaps a fitting conclusion to the story of the campaign so far, that the response of the workers is now, in some respects, as negative as the management, the unions, and the governments has been, except that the shop stewards see it.
Have now made a decision which we're carrying out to prevent the movement of any equipment or know-how from one plant to another, so the company is being immobilized internally. But in some ways, this is a sign of defeat, because we've had to go back to the old traditional trade union industrial sanction type situation. But if we're left with no other option, then we intend doing that.
So you got to hear the last sentence. Sorry for that. Yeah. So.
Use the microphone.
Yeah. Say again.
You have a microphone now, right?
Yes. I think you should just say at least one more thing before we possibly open for discussion or whatever. Is that so? This documentary followed the project up to one point, but then they managed to convince. They managed to convince Ken Livingstone, who was the mayor in London at the time, to instead, when the option of taking over the industry or using the state government powers to put pressure on the Lucas Industries, they instead had a supporter in Ken Livingstone, who at that time had a considerable amount of influence in London. So what happened then, which is somewhat covered in Adrian Smith's writing, is a development of technology networks where they were setting up community workshops and trying to involve local citizens of London in open workshops. So there is the direct link to the questions which we are also asking here today. So I don't know how to carry on. We have a quarter of an hour. We could have an open discussion around this if you would like to. I put up these books because they are really essential reading, background reading. I might say a few words on them. So the one in the middle is the main guy who was interviewed. So he was sort of described his experiences in this book. And the title Architect to Be is taken from Marx, the Paris manuscripts, I think, right? I think. When basically Marx compared he says that what distinguishes the worst architect from the best bee, though the bee will probably be producing bee waxes, bee caves, whatever it's called, to an enormous superiority towards compared to the architect. The architect has, before starting building anything, conceptualized it in her head. So there is this non-essentialist flexibility of the mind is always an integral part of work. And the question which Mikulu asked in the book is if we are going to be bees or architects, as workers. The other two books which I really want to put forward, I think to think about technology and how technology develops and is completely always interwoven with social relations and struggle. I think and to see it in the long view, I think these two books are essential reading for then reflecting over also things which is happening now, hackerspaces, whatever. The first one being Harry Braverman, Labor and Monopoly Capital, here in the Swedish title, who wrote this in '74, and who is showing very precisely how control and not profit is a priority for the factory owners in industry after industry, and how technology is being developed for that particular purpose, to ensure control, even when it's at the cost of, even when it is at the expense of profitability. And this was also coming out in the film. And forces of production. This, what you're seeing here on the screen, I think is the quote about the architect and the bee, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And David Noble, because he carried on along that line, but he made an empirically very fine study of the implementation of numerical control machinery, performative cars, like the prehistory of computers, how it was introduced in the factories, in General Electrics to start with, also in the air industry, in fact, the air weaponry manufacturing industry in the US, to combat what he called the inner and the outer enemy. The outer enemy being Soviet, so because it was producing arms and they wanted to increase the production of arms. And the inner because of the unions. They were always suspecting the unions to have communist sympathies. So by controlling the manufacturing with the use of computers or with the use of software, they hope to deplace control from the shop floor, where the suspecting workers who might be member of communist unions were, to the programming office, where more reliable white-coated engineers sat, with more reliable unions. And anyway, these three books is really recommendable. So I will stop there. Maybe we will have a discussion. And yeah. Anyone want to say something?
No. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened afterwards, after they went through this whole process? You know, you said that they inspired a social movement. Mm-hmm. So did this become like an active social movement in its time?
Well, you mean specifically what came out with Lucas?
Yeah. Like they were put out of work eventually, or.
Well, I cannot say how. I mean, eventually many of them were. I guess the plan was carried through as the industry wanted.
Yeah.
Cooley was hired by Ken Livingstone, so he was then working for the City of London, or not the City of London, for the Mayor of London, and that he did in cooperation with like early environmental movements and thinking of these kind of things. But finally, then when Thatcher came to power, she abolished she abolished a mayorship. She said there will not be any mayors of London anymore.
So was Livingston was
before.
Before, so he's been twice.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay.
When he was re-elected. Yes. Yeah. He was re-elected as a mayor in somewhere in 2000s, right?
Okay.
And when he did, there was a huge. Like the Financial Times were having huge scaremongering, like the Red Ken is back and.
Red Ken, yeah. Okay.
So yes.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, what is like the history of this kind of thing after this in general? Because I guess here they had to fight to have some kind of influence over the company. But in some sense today, especially maybe in the IT sector and so on, companies would love to have their employees give input. You want to capture the creativity of the workers, and everyone should be involved and so on. And also this thing of doing something socially useful on the side, in some sense that would today be interpreted as something very good for your sort of brand of Google or whatever. So how would you say that? I mean, if we compare this to how Google, for example, treats their employees or their company, how can we trace like a history to this? Has this been sort of taken over and neutralized by the Fridays of Google, where employees can work on whatever projects they want? And
so I can only give my my own I give my own interpretation of it. So I think there is something to be said for the autonomists, like a strain of social theory with vague connections to Marxism, but specifically rooted in the Italian experience, which is somewhere similar to this. Also, in the early 70s, you had factory workers who became very innovative in the way of resisting, in the demands they put forward in negotiating. And so the autonomists created kind of a social theory around this experience, saying that actually the technology which was developing in response to this, the way that the industry was then reorganized from the 80s and onwards in the north of Italy, with small firms cooperating in a network, being flexible, and so on. All of this can be seen as a response to those very strong confrontations and that resistance which took place 5-10 years earlier, and so the connection being that what Google and the whole kind of idea of we will be self-employed or flexible small companies working in and out of a hackerspace and these kind of things, we could be seeing as a continuation in this kind of sense. It's an innovation which came out of a struggle which was lost, and it was lost at the same. It was lost by having it successfully implemented, but it's now being implemented, but without that kind of working consciousness, like the consciousness of a conflict, and the ability to organize and impose your own political demands. Like we heard Cooley saying here that they were offering one profitable product, but for every profitable product they demanded one socially useful product. Like to be having the organizational strength and to impose that kind of demands is something which has been lost. So when that has been lost, of course, Google and others would be very happy to tap all the rest which is left, like the creativity and the input. I think that is one way of making the historical chronology work. Yeah. So we have a break. After the break, it will be Maxigas, and in a way, it's a continuation. He will speak about the ludite aspects of hackers. So welcome back.